Hey everybody, Thomas Baker here with the Game Haus, joined by Phreak. We are in State Farm Arena in Atlanta for the semifinals of Worlds 2022. Phreak, let's just get this right out of the way. Who do you have winning in the series today, and who do you think is going to win it all?
So predictions for me coming in the very first place was Gen.G or JDG. My crystal ball is JDG, so that was wrong. But still a lot of belief in Gen.G, so they're my pick for semifinals and also the finals themselves. I know there's a big protagonist buff for Deft. There's a big protagonist buff for Faker. But to me, it's like I look at today's match. I'm like, oh, literally every player on Gen.G is better in my opinion. It's like, well, hard to pick that one apart. Certainly, like DRX played really well last week when they did a good job, but even though this team's getting pushed to five, I still feel like Gen.G is going to have the overall better. Can lose, of course, right? Like, yeah, this series is maybe I don't know 5-1. Like, if you play this series 6 times, DRX wins one of them. This could be one of those 6 times, or my numbers are wrong, right? But to me, I favor Gen.G, and then in the finals as well.
Gotcha. You think they're going to take down T1
I do.
after yesterday?
I do. I mean, I think ultimately yesterday's series had a gigantic canyon in the bot lane. Both Guma and Keria played really, really well. It was easy to talk about Guma because he dealt the most damage every single game of that series, so it was very easy to just focus on him. But the two of them are really good. And if you looked across the LPL, Hope and Missing were fairly average as players, and across Worlds were fairly average as well. But now you're against the top 4 teams in the world, so guess what? You're now like far worse than your opponents. So yeah, to me, just the bot canyon was too much to overcome. But then you've got Ruler. It's like, well, guess what? Pretty sure he's gonna be okay against your bot lane. So I think a lot of the problems that JDG had, Gen.G won't.
Gotcha. Now I know we have a couple series left. The tournament isn't over, but I do think we've made it far enough where we can reflect a little bit on some of the results.
Yeah.
The LCS all kind of bottomed out. 1-5 in their groups.
Yep.
Seemed pretty far off from getting out. Meanwhile, LCK teams seem to be really excelling.
Yeah.
What are you thinking as far as the takeaways from the event with respects to the two regions and kind of the global hierarchy of things?
Yeah. I think it's still around 5 years in a row of the two best leagues in the world, of the LCK and the LPL. Obviously, we had the good run in around 2018, 2019 with G2 MSI, and then Fnatic and G2 getting to World Finals. Like, that was really good. Europe stepped up. Had a couple of MSI finals for the LCS. So once in a while, the Western teams can do pretty well, but no one's been under any other opinion than the stack rank is LCK and LPL, who swap places once in a while, and then LEC and then LCS, and that's still been true, and that's been true for 5 years running, right? 6 years running. At some point you probably consider the LMS above, but that was like 2015, maybe was the last time the LMS was above the LCS. So, and now PCS, of course. So, I think that stack ranking hasn't changed in a long time, and is unlikely to. It is cool to see that the LCK LPL movie go back and forth. Like, that's really cool. We've had 3 of the last 4 world champions of the LPL. Most of the recent MSIs, I don't have it at the top of my head which the count, but like I think everyone who's not like. I think only T1 from Korea has won MSI. There's a bunch of LPL teams doing it. So, over the last few years, it's definitely been LPL on top. But again, these teams have been trading blows. So, yeah, in terms of depth, like since 2014, one LCK team has ever failed out of groups. It's like, turns out the talent pool is at least really deep, or at least 4 teams deep every year, outside of Gen.G screwing up that one time. So yeah, it turns out that league is really good, and the top half of the league is exceptionally skilled, constantly making quarterfinals. Has it been a rough couple of years for the LCS and LEC? Yeah, like the LEC were a tiebreak away from having 0 teams in quarterfinals last year, right? LEC and LCS have won 0 games in playoff level best of 5s in over a year, right? MSI and Worlds, we got swept in every match, right? So it's like, well, okay, and then that was true last year also for Worlds, and I think MSI, I don't remember off the top of my head. So, solidly number 3, number 4. Yep, that's us. And we'll see. Like, you have high highs, you occasionally step above, but like, the LCS has made 1 semi ever, right? Like, our place is very, very obvious where it is. And you might need to have one team really come through and play well. I think EG could have been that team if they had their full roster. I think Harry did fine because of the circumstances, but like that was kind of our best hope, to be honest. LEC, I don't know, Rogue. I mean, they nearly won their group, right? It would have been an easier fight. Maybe they would have been able to do what DRX did and beat EDG. Like, maybe that road is different, and we're looking at Rogue playing today. If they had won a tiebreaker, right? It's like, oh, well, turns out no one's going to be clowning on the LEC when that's the case, right? So, well, you lost to Gen.G, the world champions. Congratulations, you tried your best, So that was almost the world we were in, right? So, that's what can happen. I think that's always the case when you have these comparisons. Is you have like the wealth of an entire region boiled down to like 8 games, and it's like, well, 8 games doesn't necessarily tell the story quite correctly. Like EG went 1-5, but like those games were pretty good for 1-5, right? Like they were actually pretty competitive. A lot of them, they maybe should have won. JDG number 1, they had a gold lead and 3-0 in Dragons. They could have beat JDG in game 1. Oh, it turns out that you're beating, the LPL champions in your opening match against them at Worlds. Oh, suddenly, the belief is different, right? So, end of the day, clearly number 3, number 4 leagues in the world, and pretty far above number 5 and pretty far below number 2.
Yeah, just reinforcing.
Yeah. It's further reinforcing the exact tier lists, which is here's the S tier, here's A, here's B, and then here's C.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're pretty well known for your patch rundowns.
Sure, yeah.
Every time there's a big patch, you pop up on my YouTube. I usually watch them. They're great.
I'm glad.
Is there anything about this tournament as far as champion diversity, champion presence, item builds, that sort of thing from your perspective that is interesting or unique?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly this has been the best Worlds for variety. And even outside of the variety, the ones that are getting played almost every game are also really exciting to watch. So on variety angle, I mean, we were midway through groups. We already break in previous year's records. The all-time record for most champions picked and banned at Worlds. Now, yes, there are of course a lot of play-ins games. Play-ins existing in this form for Worlds is only a few years old, so it's a pretty sparse data set for that. And there, of course, are now a lot of extra games, which means you have a lot more room for that. But like, hey, Heimer Sport is a thing. Now, it wasn't contested at all in the previous draft, but like, we saw in the quarterfinals a few teams wanted to play it. We've had a pretty good, amount of variety out there. I mean, right, the fact that we're getting like Silas, Akali, Yone, like those are fun champions to watch. And I think, the meta's not super exciting when it's all assassins all the time, but like you have a good mix of styles. You have some Azir, some Victor, some Orianna, some Lissandra. You have globals like Galio, but you have a lot of fighters. You have a lot of assassins. Like there is a really good wealth of options. People like to clown on Yuumi, but Yuumi has like 2 picks in like the entire quarterfinal stage. Like, oh no, it costs you a ban, but also your Gen.G you can counter it actually. So it turns out she's beatable, but you've got to learn Singe Support. I know it's a weird one, but like, it's beatable. So like, both variety is good and the actual picks have been good. To me, I credit like the Riot live design team for that one. I guess they're called the Summoner's Rift team if you want to be technical about it, because they're definitely really keenly aware of okay, here's what we are seeing coming in. And they kind of play Kingmaker a bit, like, and I think they'll own up to it, where it's like, okay, we're actually pretty happy with the mid lane meta being these champions. Like, these are going to be fun champions to see at Worlds. It's like, so they might like not nerf Silas, but they might nerf Victor. It's like, well, we'd rather have a Silas meta than a Victor meta, right? That's going to be more fun. Hey, does jungle feel really varied? It does. Okay, cool. Like, we'll give a smaller for Lee Sin, so we'll see like Lee Sin 1 in 20 games. Great, right? And that's why like there are Lee Sin buffs coming in. We don't see enough Thresh. It's like it's a bunch of engaged tanks, but like the once in a while Enchanter, like okay. Thresh is a fun champion to watch. Like, people generally tend to watch Thresh, so cool. Like, they'll intentionally buff Thresh because he's fun, but they'll do a very small one to where, like, he'll be 15% presence, not 90%, right? And I think so they did a really good job with Kingmaking in this patch. Like, they did a really good job, and we have a really, really fun Worlds meta, right? So they did a good job of that one. The other point about the itemization one, I brought it up really briefly I think it was game 4 of the series, then stuff happened, so I moved on, there is a trend of Oblivion Orb, which I think is just kind of interesting because there's a bunch of melee mids, and melee mids are relying on Doran's Shield and Second Wind, and if you're melee versus melee, then you use like Silas W to heal a bunch. And so Oblivion Orb has been a really common first item build for opposing AP champs in mid. The funny thing about Oblivion Orb stats is it, to my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, but to my understanding, the like little Grievous Winds tooltip doesn't count regen reduced, Second Wind healing reduced, and Doran Shield healing reduced. So even if you are playing Victor Silas, where Silas won't hit W on you in pretty much any of the matchups, and it's rank with W anyway, because that's how melee range Silas matchups work, it's only on the tooltip counting W healing blocked, but yet is actually blocking like you literally hit an E on him. It's like, okay, well for 2 seconds your base health return of 2% has been cut by a quarter, so I automatically get a couple extra health this way, and your second one is going to trigger. Well, that's going to be cut for a while as well. So like there's a whole bunch that's not tracked on the tooltip. And there's this weird, I don't know, it's such a minor thing as well, because it's like such a minor optimization, but it's been such a vitriolic thing that like, hey, turns out this item is better than your tooltip is telling you. So it's not really horrible. Overall though, like to give my thoughts on, hey, buying Oblivion or whatever, I think it makes sense to do it in a melee matchup where like Silas is going to max W and you really care about that one. But otherwise, in general, the best way to get grievous wins on a team is on a support who's doesn't care as much about power spikes, right? Where like you don't really want to delay Infinity Edge third on an AD carry. You don't really want to delay Ludens into, let's say it's Seraphs into Deathcap third if you can help it. There's times where it's still relevant. Again, if you're Akali versus Silas, actually your trades just go so much better if you can cut his healing down. So you do it. But as far as I can tell from any investigation that I've done, Grievous is best put on a support, and your support's job should be to be in the fights in the first place. Like if you're not there, what are they doing? So I think it's in most contexts, like it's support jobs. You're going to delay your mythic by 800 gold, but it's going to be worth it. Everyone else gets to build their power spikes.
Gotcha.
There you go. There's a thing.
Yeah. No, that's great. Now, you've been casting for quite a while.
I have.
This is how long has it been?
So I've done Worlds since 2011. This is the, I want to say 12th Worlds, if I'm not trolling, and 10 full years of the LCS. Yeah. So a good long time, and as a hobbyist before that. So yeah, I mean, as a professional though, like as a full-time caster for a full 10 years.
Full 10 years.
Yeah.
How does it feel being in North America for an event like this after so long being everywhere else?
Oh, it feels great. I mean, certainly it's really fun being with the audience and the crowds and whatnot. Obviously, COVID shutting everything down for a while, like made that a very sort of lonely experience where it's like LCS either in our bedrooms at home on an online setup or even in the studio. It's like, well, but there's still no audience yet. Yeah, it is absolutely great being with an audience. Absolutely a ton of fun. Today, actually, I'll be doing crowd interactions off stream, like during commercial breaks. So I'll be the one being like, let's do a dance party, let's be cringe together. Like that'll be really fun. But yeah, it's really, really awesome. And I totally get like, we're often not local language. Like if we're in Korea, the local language is going to be Korean, right? We don't speak, so we're not the local audience. And there's certainly a lot of comfort in, for some people, like, well, we're going to cast most from home. We'll go to the LEC studio, the LCS studio, cast from there because like there's something we can provide while being in Korea. And I think it's actually a really defensible stance of like, yep, we're going to cast out of our old studios. And it saves about half the team a lot of travel, which is like a huge positive. Yep. But it is nice being in the crowd with the audience cheering, especially when you can interact with them. I do like my audience pandering. I think in the cast yesterday, I was like, hey, you guys want to sound like 20,000 people? And then they cheered on command. It was great. It was really fun. So yeah, definitely really enjoyable. Yeah, it's really, really cool being in places like this.
Gotcha. One last question. Do you still get pre-show jitters for something like this, or is this kind of just another day in the office for you at this point?
I tend to not get pre-show jitters almost at all. I think the last time I did was World Finals 2017. Yeah, 17 in Beijing. And it was just like, wow, it's the World Finals. It's the first time I had cast finals, I think, since 2011. I did an LSS, but I hadn't cast it in a long time. And it was just like, oh, this is like a really big moment. And then like Champs League starts and just like, I'm just in casting mode, right? So, yeah, I would say in general, I don't get a lot of nerves anymore. I would say I usually didn't tend to in the first place. Like there was never a lot of it. Just in general, that was never a big thing. The most that would usually happen would be like watching opening ceremonies and like the stuff we're doing right now for like groups and quarters, whatever, is like, and coming onto the stage, Zeka, and it's like, that's cool, but like, watching the actual opening ceremony, like that just builds up so much hype that like, okay, like, maybe it's half coming down from that hype level where it's like you have to deliver champs like that, like a 5. Right. You can't be like, welcome, they've picked Silas. Like that can matter if it's game 5, when it's Zeka, but like, Yumi banned first on red side is not an exciting line, right? Okay, the crowd's cheering for it, it's cute, good job crowd, but yeah, just like getting back to like the correct level for champ select, I think is more that disparity than like, oh no, it's a crowd.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Phreak, for
Thank
your
you.
time. Good luck today
Thank
with
you.
everything. And for everyone else, check out thegamehaus.com. We'll catch you later.